Siberia, a place so vast that it makes everywhere else look like a backyard. This giant chunk of Russia stretches from the Ural Mountains all the way to the Pacific Ocean, covering a whopping 77% of the country. It's so big, you could lose entire countries in it and still have room for an ice rink or two. But here's where it gets interesting. Siberia, or to be precise, the Shoria Mountains in southern Siberia had a secret. This secret had been hidden deeper than Lake Baikal. Yep, that Lake Baikal, the deepest lake in the world, which by the way is also chilling in Siberia like it's no big deal. Anyways, what's the big secret? Buckle up because I'm about to spill the tea. Siberian style. Should I call it Gornaya Shoria, Mountainous Shoria, or Mountain Shoria? All these names are that of a territory in southern Siberia, Russia, east of the Altai Mountains. It is the southern part of Kemerovo Oblast. The indigenous population of the region is the Shors, but that's not the discovery or anything new. So what is? Well, Gornaya Shoria is the place where the discovery was made. Researchers first became interested in the area of Gornaya Shoria back in 1991. However, due to a lack of funds following the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was not possible to explore the territory at that time. The work resumed in the autumn of 2013. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, it was 10 whole years ago, but hear me out if you keep in mind how old humanity is. Literally estimated to be thousands of years old. I think 10 years ago is still fairly new. Anyways, when the work in the area resumed in 2013, many scientists and researchers set out to explore what exactly is going on in that mountainous area, which is about 3,600 feet above sea level. And I don't think I have to tell you this journey wasn't that easy. The area is quite secluded and was inaccessible for years and guarded by checkpoints during the Soviet era. But what exactly draws people to venture into such a hard-to-reach place? You see, there have been whispers, numerous reports actually, about the presence of many strange megalithic structures in this secluded area. And as it turns out, those reports weren't off the mark at all. These structures are also known as the Kulum megalithic complex, and boy, are they a sight to behold. Perched on the peaks and ridges of Mount Kulum, which towers at about 3,947 feet above sea level, these formations are truly something else. Now, Mount Kulum isn't in some far-off land. It's actually pretty close to home, just about 5 miles from the village of Orton, nestled right in the stunning Shoria Mountains. Mount Kulum is part of the bigger picture, the Kulum-Surak Massif. This massive granite area has elevations ranging from around 2,297 to 3,947 feet. Now here's where it gets a bit wild. Some folks have written articles suggesting these rock formations aren't just natural, they believe these are gigantic, ancient, man-made structures. Yup, that's the gist of what the discovery is. Georgy Sidorov from the Kemerovo region was one of the driving forces behind the 2013 expedition that brought together a team of 19 keen researchers. He shared on his social media, "Our journey to Gornaya Shoria has wrapped up, and I have to say the sights we encountered are truly mind-blowing. We came across gigantic granite blocks arranged in these intricate polygonal patterns that are hard to believe." Now, for those who might not be too deep into geology, you're probably wondering what all this means. Let's break it down a bit. While exploring, the team stumbled upon something that looked like it was from another world. They found these massive stones, bigger than buses, all neatly arranged in patterns that didn't look random at all. These giant stones are what we call megaliths. The term megalith comes from 2 Greek words that mean big and stone. Think of Stonehenge in England, with its massive stone circles. Megaliths are just that huge stones that were used to create structures or monuments by people in ancient times. We're not talking about small bricks, but colossal blocks of stone. Similarly, these enormous granite blocks in Gornaya Shoria have been arranged and meticulously placed in what's described as polygonal patterns, meaning the stones have been cut and arranged in shapes with multiple angles and sides, fitting together like a giant 3D jigsaw puzzle. This isn't something you'd expect to happen naturally. It suggests that long ago, people went to incredible lengths to create these structures for reasons we can still only guess at. But that's just the start. So back to the expedition. Upon reaching the site described, the research team came across a huge wall made up of huge blocks of stone, which seemed to be granite, with flat surfaces, right angles, and sharp corners. But here's the thing. Gornaya Shoria megaliths are believed to be the largest megalithic stones ever discovered in human history. Now you might be thinking, wait, there are others? Oh, you bet there are. First up is a colossal stone block weighing a whopping 1,650 tons, which was discovered in 2014 near the ancient site of Baalbek in Lebanon. This giant limestone block stretches an incredible 64 feet in length, stands 19.6 feet wide, and towers at 18 feet tall. But hold on, there's more. Ever heard of the Stone of the Pregnant Woman? Also in Baalbek, this massive stone tips the scales at 1,240 tons and measures about 64 feet long, 14 feet wide, and 18 feet tall. And just when you thought it couldn't get any more jaw-dropping, there's another 800-ton stone block at Baalbek. This one's about 64 feet long, 12 feet wide, and 16 feet tall. And then we have this massive masterpiece which is even bigger than all of these. Can you guess the weight of one of the largest stones used in its construction? If you said around 3,000 tons, you hit the nail on the head. That's right, the estimated weight of these stones actually tips the scales at more than 3,000 tons. To put that into perspective, that's about the same as 500 adult elephants combined, and that's not even the half of it. When Sidorov took a closer look at this incredible structure, he uncovered something truly astonishing. This massive wall stretched out for an impressive 700 feet, and the stones that made up this wall were not your average building blocks. Each one is a colossal 65 feet in length and towers between 16 to 23 feet high. Some of these stone piles reach up as high as 40 meters, which is like a 13-story building. It's not just the sheer size that's awe-inspiring, though. Imagine what it took to pull that off back in the day without all the fancy tech we have now. The stones appear to be stacked in a Cyclopean masonry style, as if they're carefully arranged in layers, kind of like how you might stack Lego bricks, but on a gigantic scale without the use of much, if any, mortar or glue to hold them together. And I don't think you would be surprised at all if I told you that Sidorov and his team were downright astonished when they discovered these rock formations that looked like they had been shaped and smoothed over time. When they saw it, they were totally blown away by the size and beauty of it all. You might wonder, if people already knew about this place back in 1990, what's the big deal now? Well, those early explorers thought they were just looking at natural formations. But this was something else entirely. The notes that Sidorov jotted down turned out to be key in figuring out the puzzle of this mysterious spot. These huge granite blocks, like I said before, were all carefully arranged into a wall with this intricate polygonal design. It was like nothing anyone had seen from that time period before. Sidorov couldn't help but compare it to other ancient wonders like Stonehenge or the Egyptian pyramids, because they were kind of similar in size, and they also have a whole vibe of mystery. But how? How can someone carve these enormous blocks? When were they carved? How were they transported and assembled into a wall, and that too in such a remote, challenging location? I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. Well, Sidorov noted that these structures apparently go all the way back to around 100,000 years old, and that's changing everything. Why? Before this, the oldest examples of human building we knew about involved simple structures like the post and lintel system. Think of Stonehenge, but even more basic. And then there were the artifacts, like the famous Venus of Willendorf, which dates back to around 28,000 to 25,000 BCE. This stuff showed us how our ancestors transitioned from the nomadic life of the Paleolithic era to settling down, farming, and building amazing structures in the Neolithic period. This discovery shifted the whole timeline back by a huge leap, suggesting that our ancestors had the knowledge and skills to build monumental structures way earlier than we thought. This could mean there was a whole civilization out there, way ahead of its time, that we knew nothing about until now. Imagine a group of people thriving and building, then just disappearing into the sands of time. Fun fact, in Siberia, some Russian scientists found what looks like an ancient house or tent made out of mammoth bones. This isn't just any old pile of bones. It's considered one of the earliest examples of big, ambitious human architecture, but it was built just 25000 years ago. And that just shows that they were advanced, way more than we can imagine. Anyways, moving on. Theories about the origin. Now, like many other things, on one point when it comes to this discovery, some experts argue, hey, these were made by humans. Check out this detail, look over there, while another camp counters, no, you're mistaken. Humans didn't have that kind of sophistication back then. Let's take a look at both arguments. The theory that the megaliths are man-made. The first theory implies the existence of an ancient civilization so advanced that our history books would need a serious rewrite if it were true. And one of the supporters of this theory is Dr. Valery Uvarov, a man whose job title alone, head of the Department of Paleoscience, Paleotechnology, and UFO research at the National Security Academy of Russia, sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi novel. Dr. Uvarov also took a trip to the mountains of Gornaya Shoria in Southern Siberia and came back with something spectacular. He's got these photographs, see? He's betting his vodka that these are man-made marvels. But as with any good story, there's a twist. There are skeptics who think these are just Mother Nature showing off, creating something that looks eerily like a construction project she forgot to finish. But Dr. Uvarov isn't the lone theorist out there. There's Sidorov on his side, among many others. Sidorov also came across some fascinating findings during his research. He noticed circular holes in some of the stones, perfectly round and very precise. So what's the big deal? It could be erosion over time, right? Well, no. What really caught his attention was how some of these stones looked like they had been melted or reshaped in certain areas. It was as though they had undergone some kind of ancient process that changed their shape and structure. Sidorov thinks that it isn't really all that coincidental, and our ancestors could have used some ancient technique to melt and mold the rocks, which is pretty fascinating considering how long ago we're talking about here. And you know what? Sidorov knows his stuff. He's an expert in his field, but let me tell you something that proves his point. Recent studies have shown that humans in South Africa during the Middle Stone Age were already playing with fire. Literally, they heated silkrete, a really tough rock, to make stone tools. This wasn't just for fun. Heating the rocks made them easier to shape into blades and resulted in much tougher tools. So, when you think about it, maybe the ancient people in Sidorov's study were just taking things a step further. It's all still up in the air, and we're waiting on the experts to give us the final word. But it's definitely something to think about, isn't it? He also talked about the chance of a massive, something cataclysmic may have occurred in the past that caused widespread damage to the area. It looked like many huge rocks were thrown all over the place, as if a super strong force had hit them. It suggests that whatever event occurred was forceful enough to displace large rocks and scatter them across the landscape. So that means there's likely an incident in human history that has never been theorized before. Another main point of his was the construction of these structures that had been arranged in a pretty unusual cyclopean way, and that too vertically standing on a giant foundation. So could it really be natural? That's not all. He talked about something else as well. While Sidorov and his team were going on their journey, they experienced something quite unusual. Their compasses started behaving weirdly, and not just of a single person or two or three, literally all of them. The needles of the compasses started diverting in the direction opposite to the megaliths. But why would that happen? Well, one explanation could be the fact that there was some negative geomagnetic field in the area. And since geomagnetic fields are created by the Earth's magnetic core, they can vary in strength and direction depending on location. If there was a localized area with a negative geomagnetic field, it could potentially interfere with the normal behavior of compass needles, causing them to point in unexpected directions. And some experts are speculating that it could be the result of a possibly residual effect of some sort of ancient energy field. Interestingly, the phenomenon of geomagnetic anomalies isn't just something we see in Gornaya Shoria. It's actually been noticed at various ancient sites across the globe. Now, I'm not talking about something happening tens of thousands of years ago, but rather pointing out evidence suggesting early humans might have been clued into magnetism and its effects. Take, for instance, archaeological discoveries that show ancient civilizations like the Chinese, Greeks, and Egyptians were hip to naturally occurring magnetic materials such as lodestone, which is basically magnetite, and might have even used them for finding their way around or for divination. Not to mention, it's thought that observing migratory animals like birds and fish, which rely on the Earth's magnetic field to navigate during their long travels, could have sparked early human interest in direction and navigation. And then there's the fascinating tidbit that even the oldest known temples, which date back tens of thousands of years, were built with some kind of alignment to their natural surroundings. Our ancestors knew a lot about Earth, possibly even things that general public like us isn't knowledgeable about and is just told it's nature. Anyways, back to the discovery. The worsening weather didn't do Sidorov and his team any favors and cut their exploration short. But even with their time cut short, they managed to gather some pretty important info about the ruins. The question that naturally comes to mind is this: if these massive structures were actually built by people and not just a trick of nature, then what kind of advanced society could possibly have thrived in such a tough spot? We're talking about a location known for its unforgiving climate, with winters so brutal that you'd wonder why anyone would choose to live there. What could possibly drive a group of people to settle in such a demanding environment? It seems like it would have been a whole lot easier for them to head south, where the weather's warmer, and set up shop there instead. Regardless, if it turns out that ancient humans did shape these stones, then we're talking about the biggest megaliths ever to have been manually crafted. Looks like we have another Egypt's pyramid situation here, just made bigger and more unexplainable. Now, there's no shortage of wild theories floating around the internet. Some say this site could be proof of an ancient, lost civilization or evidence of visits from UFOs. Or hear me out, some theories suggest that humans just used to be giants back in the days, or maybe there was another race of giants. I mean, there have been several flare-ups about giant human skeletons being found. Whether they're true or not is a whole other story. One thing is for sure, the discovery of the Gornaya Shoria megaliths has sparked a wave of excitement among those who love a good mystery. People are talking about a society that was pretty advanced and got wiped out by a massive disaster, leaving us to piece together their story, just like the civilizations straight out of the myths and legends that every culture seems to have about great cities and knowledge lost to time. Could humans really have existed around Gornaya Shoria? This one is an alternative theory that suggests these structures came into existence during the Ice Age. Well, you see, around 20,000 years ago, during the peak of the last Ice Age, Siberia and much of the Northern Hemisphere went through a big climate change. I know you saw that movie. Anyways, even though it was colder and ice sheets were spreading, Siberia somehow had it better than Europe and North America. You see, unlike those places that were almost swallowed up by ice, Siberia managed to dodge that icy blanket. Instead, it was home to the Mammoth Steppe, a vast area that was cold and dry, but surprisingly rich in grasses and plants. This wasn't just any piece of land. It was a haven for a whole bunch of large animals like woolly mammoths and rhinoceroses, not to mention the predators that followed them around. This rich environment was like a gold mine for human populations back then, providing everything they needed to survive. Meanwhile, over in Northern Europe, things were a bit rough with thick ice sheets covering the land, making it tough for people and animals to get around or find resources. Human settlements were mostly huddled in the southern areas, where it was ice-free but still pretty cold. These spots were like little refugees, but they didn't have nearly as much to offer as the Mammoth Steppe in Siberia. And guess what? We've got proof that people actually lived in Siberia during the Ice Age. Russian scientists found a site packed with stone tools, ivory weapons, and bones of all sorts of animals that Ice Age hunters would have gone after. They used a dating technique on the artifacts and figured out they were about 30,000 years old. That's way older than the earliest known human settlement in the Americas. Donald Grayson, a big name in paleoanthropology from the University of Washington in Seattle, thinks this discovery is a game changer because it pushes back the timeline of humans living in the chilly parts of Siberia by quite a bit. So, if it turns out that those massive stone structures in Siberia were actually built during the Ice Age, it tells us that the people there weren't just surviving, they were thriving. With all the resources from the Mammoth Steppe, they could probably have supported larger communities and even taken on big projects like building those megaliths. What's really intriguing is that despite the buzz Gornaya Shoria has created, no one's gone back for a closer look. It's as if this potentially groundbreaking site is being left to whisper its secrets to the wind. This lack of follow-up has everyone scratching their heads and adds an extra layer of mystery to the already puzzling stones. And sure, the photos are pretty convincing, and it's tough to argue for a natural cause. But let's not forget, nature has its own way of surprising us with incredible rock formations that seem almost impossible, like the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland or the Waffle Rock in West Virginia, the ones that believed it was a natural process. The stance of the Russian Federation on these massive stone structures is pretty clear. They're seen as just natural formations. But really, without digging deep and doing a full-on archaeological study, how can we be totally sure that these enormous and oddly shaped stones are just the work of nature? Some articles in Russia have talked about scientists thinking these rock formations came about through natural geological activities related to the weathering of the rocks at Mount Shoria. It's said that both the movements of the Earth's plates on deeply buried rocks and the kind of pressure release happening in rocks closer to the surface as they get lifted and eroded can naturally create these big, block-like rock formations. These formations are full of cracks and joints that meet at almost perfect right angles, known as orthogonal joint sets. And it's not unusual for a type of chemical weathering called spheroidal weathering to happen when water moves through these joint sets. This leads to the rock near the joints breaking down and changing, making it easier for erosion to carry away the weakened rock. What's left behind are these core stones, big blocks of rock that have kind of rounded edges and are split apart by various sized cracks. These core stones then form either hills or mountains that have these exposed rectangular blocks of jointed rock, much like the formations seen in the Mountain Shoria area. These rugged landscapes are often referred to as tors or koppies. All of them are somewhat correct at some point. What do you think? Is the excuse of the rocks being natural just a cover-up to hide the actual history? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked the video, please do like and subscribe. Your support means a lot. Thanks. See you next time.